I played Dark Souls for the first time in 2021, partly because I had abstained from playing video games for a while, and because I had only played a handful of them since acquiring a PS4 in Japan. Dark Souls 1 triggered my gamer spot, or G-spot for short, in a way that no G-spot has ever been manhandled before. If you are interested in listening to my thoughts on Dark Souls Remastered, I highly suggest you watch my other quasi-review style video in the box below. So I played through the trilogy in succession. There was some Bloodborne in the way, but yeah, I played all of them in order. They're obviously different from one another, but as a collective, they are very much the same type of game. They are a Souls game. And I enjoyed all three of them immensely. In fact, I have a hard time imagining how you could like one of these games and dislike the others. So I can imagine, for example, not liking one of the Dark Souls as much as another one which you really liked, but I have a hard time imagining that you straight up dislike the game. I can imagine disliking some elements about it, but not the game as a whole. And I imagine that most of you feel the same way. Many of us have played this trilogy, and since the differences between them can be at times minuscule, the way in which we all rank them is bound to be different from person to person. These games are very deep, and bear in mind that I have not interacted with many of the systems in it. So I don't pretend to be an expert on these games at all. Far from it, I'm just a simple layman with a very simple opinion, so just take it for what it is. I always play as a knight, so that's just how I roll. I always prefer, just regular old sword and shield style of, play style. So that's how I roll. So with this in mind, let's start off with number 3. Dark Souls 2. So every time this game gets mentioned on the internet, every time, everyone always prefaces their comment by saying how either the game or their comment about it is going to be controversial. Well, guess what? I'm going to preface my comments on this game by saying that they are going to be controversial. I think this game is the weakest of the bunch. Story-wise, I think it's pretty interesting and holds up well, due in part to how the team, and yes, I know that Miyazaki wasn't the lead developer, okay? But the team, they very much made their own thing. You have to break the curse of the undead, and the game's atmosphere is very somber and moody. It's very unique. It's awesome. The Majula music has a distinct tone to it that differentiates it from the themes of the hub worlds in Dark Souls 1 and 3. Anyway, I was saying that I think this game's story holds up because it's very much its own thing, while containing all the elements that cement it as taking place in the same universe from the first game. My gripes with this game are more about level design and gameplay. I played this game, like all the others, completely blind. Level design is fine, and the world is semi-open. Like, you have multiple branching paths, most of them dead ends. They don't connect to one another in the way that we all know characterizes the world in Dark Souls 1. And that's fine, but it's not as awesome as Dark Souls 1. If you were to pin them against each other, which is what we're doing for the purposes of this video, Dark Souls 1 comes out on top. Gameplay-wise, particularly in terms of combat, is where this game loses a lot of points for me. The very first time I booted this game up, I immediately noticed how off the movement felt. In fact, here are my thoughts from that very same moment. There's something about the movement which feels ever so slightly different than Dark Souls 1. I can't put my finger on it. There's like a lag, an input lag with the camera. The analog dead zones can't be altered on console, and I'm playing on PS5. So this makes movement feel weird. So yeah, it can be tweaked on PC apparently, but I'm not playing on PC, so... And it's not just the movement. Animations such as parries, backstabs, the way swords swing, they all feel slightly different and janky. It's nothing game-breaking, but it was enough to annoy me after coming from the first one, which felt slow but responsive. Another thing is that some of the boss fights in this game feel like great value boss fights. Okay, so we have a total of 32 boss fights, 42 with the DLC, and you know, most of them are very forgettable. Of course, there are some very incredible boss fights, especially later on. Okay, so the Pursuer, the Fume Knight, the Looking Glass Knight, Cerulone. These are just some of the incredible boss fights that this game has, and they are honestly cream of the crop in terms of quality boss fights. All in all, I enjoyed this game an incredible lot, but I rank it below the others mostly for gameplay reasons, which is something that I personally value a lot. Dark Souls 3. So this game has the simplest story in terms of your initial objective. Bear with me because there's a lot of things that go over my head, but I understood that this game takes place a long time after the events of Dark Souls 1, and that many people had linked the fire since then, the Lords of Cinder. You are tasked with linking it once again by returning the 5 Lords of Cinder to their thrones. That's the main gist. It's pretty straightforward, right? If you have played the previous Dark Souls games, you'll be able to understand this very quickly and very early on in the game. Of course, we also have the other sub-stories going on in the different places that we go to in this game. And this is where I start to lose my grasp of what's going on. So all these subplots are intricate and they all relate to each other in a way that I'm never able to piece by myself, with some exceptions. Like, for example, sometimes it's laid on very thick. It's not hard to realize that Farron Keep is actually Darkroot Garden and Ulasil. You can see the dead giant mushrooms, and you can even find the Crown of Dusk in a cave. The item description is as explicit as you can get. On the other hand, I didn't understand what was going on with Yorm and the Profane Capital, nor did I understand the tragedy of the Lothric Princess until I researched it online. A lot of that stuff, it just went over my head, okay? And one reason is because I'm not too bright, nor am I thorough when in reading item descriptions or piecing together information. And another reason is because I only play these games once a week, so I quickly forget small details. Now, the reason why I rate this game highly is for its smooth combat more than anything. I am replaying this game right now, and it has the best movement of the trilogy. It is just straight up butter. Everything is slightly quicker than the other two. I even jumped for joy the first time I realized that you can consume Estus while moving. Drink, drink, drink. He drinks the Estus flask pretty rapidly, it seems like. All of these subtle improvements to the core movement mechanics are very subtle, like to the point where it's something that you might not realize if you're playing this game after having played Dark Souls 1, but you played it like a long time ago. You might actually remember Dark Souls 1 feeling like this. It's not only after you play the games in quick succession, one after the other, that you'll start to notice these subtle differences. The boss fights are the absolute best from the series. They are all difficult, but it's nothing that should be insurmountable if you've played, Dark Souls 1 and 2, which is what I think you should do. I think you should play them in order. You get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of the quality from these boss fights, and very rarely do you get duds like you do in Dark Souls 2. So my biggest disappointment with this game is not the story. It is what it is. It's the progression. It's very linear, something that I was not expecting at all. And linear isn't necessarily bad. I don't mind a linear game, but the semi-linear progression from Dark Souls 1 is just straight up better. You know, I'm gonna say it, it's just better. And this is something that I'm 100% sure that the majority of the people who have played this trilogy will agree with. It's not bad, but if given the option of having a progression style in the vein of Dark Souls 1 versus this one, I am pretty sure that most people would pick the Dark Souls 1 style of world and progression. Now, Dark Souls 1. I'm going to be honest, I was one of those people who didn't understand anything about this game's story at all until after I finished it and started consuming all of the incredible fan-made content that's out there online. I am not a perceptive person, so yeah, I was completely blown away when I realized what was going on, especially with all the other minor characters. Like, Pinwheel. That's Pinwheel's story? Really? Like, you got all that from item descriptions and environmental storytelling?
Holy fish paste!
That's incredible. The world here is fascinating. In terms of mood and ambience, it feels like the somberness of Dark Souls 2 combined with the epicness of Dark Souls 3. It's no secret, nor does it seem to be disputed much. This game has the best world in the trilogy. Lush and varied environments, all looping onto themselves and tickling my G-spot harder than Petrus of Thorlin tickles the insides of a medieval hamburger.
You what?
This progression just feels so incredibly satisfying in a way that none of the other two games managed to replicate. The game can be janky at times, and we all know it. I've seen this fucker in Blighttown fall down endlessly more than once. It's not janky in the same way that Dark Souls 2 is, though. Combat feels tight. It's slow. It's deliberate. It's tense. It does what it sets out to do well. It took me a long time to understand that this game is not a hack and slash, you know? It's kind of like a turn-based action game. So, we all know what we mean. You're face to face with somebody, you're circling each other, you're waiting for that opportunity to strike. It's very tense. It's very awesome. Well, those are just some of my quick thoughts on this amazing trilogy. It rekindled my love for gaming. I'm still playing through all of the Souls games, and I want to play Elden Ring, but I'm waiting for the DLC to be released, and for the game and the DLC to be released in one convenient package. So yeah, I've still got a lot of waiting to do. In the meanwhile, please enjoy my playthroughs. I'm playing through Sekiro now. I'll probably make a video about Sekiro when I'm finished with it, because it's very different. So yeah, please stay tuned. I'll try to keep posting more content and keep things interesting. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you soon.